Hello again, welcome back everyone. LiquorHound here with you, and thank you for joining me once again for another spirit review video. Today we're going to be taking a look at three rye whiskeys, kinda. One is a Canadian rye, one's a Canadian whiskey that has a lot of rye, and one is a somewhat rye because it's 60% rye, but then there's also some brandies just thrown in as well into the blend. The Bhakta 1928. But the Gooderham Worts, 4 grain. Retail pricing on it, $35. Again, it is a blend of those 4 grains, and to be funny, they went ahead and bottled it at 44.4% ABV, 88.8 proof. And at $35, $40, I think it's a very solid whiskey, so I wanted to make sure I can get this video shot for you with that. For the holidays, because this makes a lot of great cocktails as well, and it's relatively inexpensive. If you want to throw that in eggnog, it's going to be perfect. Moving forward, Lot 40 Dark Oak. This actually made my best Canadian whiskey from 2023 last year. This one is a new bottle though, and that bottle I picked up that other bottle maybe 2 years ago, year and a half ago, and it was delicious. So I went ahead and got 2 more in. Cracked it the other day because I was out, and it is still very, very solid. And so I was like, wow, I got to go ahead and review this one for you. 100% rye. The only thing that this one does to make it the dark oak version is that it spends the majority of its life in number 2, brand new charred oak barrels, and then it gets kind of finished in a heavily charred number 4 barrel. But they don't say on the website that that's new. They say that number 2 char is new. The number 4, they leave that off. So this could very well be going into those recharred barrels, used barrels that they kind of scratch and rechar up to a number 4, refill them. That could be what that is, in which case that wouldn't fall under the U.S. definition of a rye, which has to be in those new charred oak barrels. But that's what's going on with that one. Retail price again, $65, $75. And last but not least, the Bhakta 1928, which if you read the back of the label, it tells you what that is. 60% Armagnac, straight rye. I'm sorry, 60% straight rye, 30% Calvados, 10% Armagnac. To whereas if you look on the front, it just says Bhakta straight rye whiskey, Calvados and Armagnac, 1928, inspired by the Roaring Twenties, 100 proof. That gets a little confusing because I've seen online where a lot of stores and different reviewers have thought this was rye whiskey finished in Armagnac and Calvados casks. But it's not. It's 30% Calvados, 10% Armagnac. And the vintages on the Armagnac are very old. Some of them do go back to 1928. Of course, that could just be a teaspoon of that. And the rest of it being the younger vintages. But there's still a lot of them in the 90s and so on. I'll try to put them up here. But this one, when I first tried it, beautiful bottle, by the way. I mean, that Tiffany blue label and the lettering is amazing. Of course, the Art Deco looking bottle is always beautiful. But when I first tried this one, I immediately was overwhelmed by the rancio of the old Calvados that's in it. And I loved that about it. And I thought it was a beautiful whiskey. Well, call it a whiskey, but it's a blend. But I thought it was a very beautiful spirit. And then when I asked about the price, I was like, okay, how much is this bottle? Because I'm thinking Bhakta spirits, they're constantly in the $200 to $500 realm. So I was bracing for at least $200, and then he told me it was $65. And I was like, $65 for that? That's delicious. And even though it doesn't fit in any specific category, it's a very enjoyable pour. And so I went ahead and ordered some from Bhakta, their website. You can order it and they'll ship it to you. The one thing to know about Bhakta is that I don't see anywhere on this bottle that tells me this is batch 1. But I know this is batch 1 because I got it before they sold out online. Then they sold out, and then I got an email saying that they got 50 cases restocked. I contacted the company. Actually, a buddy of mine contacted the company, and they said, that's batch 2. So I was like, listen, batch 1 is out right now on store shelves. So I was kind of like, you're probably better off getting batch 1 because we know what that is. Batch 2 might be a little different. It could be good. Who knows? I don't know yet. But again, I don't like to gamble on stuff that I haven't had. And I know that one was really good. So if you go to your store right now, you can probably find this. It's more than likely batch 1 because, again, here we are November 15th. And batch 2 just hit their store. So by the time it hits distribution, more than likely you're looking at 2 to 3 more weeks before it's on store shelves. Okay. All right, but let's get going. Gooderham and Worts, the 4 grain on the nose. It's got that nice kind of buttery caramel. Butterscotch is pretty much what's going on here. You get this real good combination of rye character, but also a lot of malt heaviness going on. I would call this one, there's almost like a lot of orange oil, almost like fresh Seville orange peels. Because typically I used to dry those out to make pecan, but that is what this smells like. There is some really nice chocolate tones, some leatheriness going in here. That little rye, we get a little rye bread, a little doughiness as well. That dark chocolate, almond slivers, and oak. And there's a little light perfume in here. But let's go ahead and taste it. Wow. That's a solid whiskey for $35. Good viscosity, solid medium viscosity. But it transitions in flavors. It's almost like, because when they do a blend like that, 4 grain, they're not sitting there putting a 4 grain mash bill together and then distilling it. They distill everything separate. You know, they'll distill the corn, they'll distill and barrel age it, and the wheat and the rye and the malt, the barley, all separately. And then they'll work a blend at the very end. And I think when you do it like that, and then you can adjust the different levels, they can really fine tune the blend to where you get all this kind of influence and almost like a little harmony of all the 4 together. And I think they've done a great job at a $35 price point here. Yeah, the first thing that hits you is that rye, orange oil, almost a little bit toasted marshmallow in there, sandwiched between the malt that's come rushing up now. The almond slivers as you hit that little light baking spice swell, because it is only 88.8 proof. It's really nice and moderate. And then you start twisting down into the finish. Dark chocolate, cocoa, shaved cocoa almost. The leather. That little doughiness of the bread, almost like a little bit of a sourdough bread in there, but a big heavy oak as well. I'm still chewing. You still get the light orange peels that you were getting from the very early on. You're still getting that in the back end. Rerunning it. Oh, yeah. Right when you hit that rye, it's almost like the rye and the orange peels come together. You get that little butterscotch from that corn. And that's where you get that malt hitting. Toasted marshmallow. That baking spice. The cocoa, the leather, the oak. There's almost a hint of like that little light perfume that I was picking up on the nose is in here, but it's almost just it's an aspect from the rye. Could be a little bit from the malt. But to me, it's almost reminiscent of a single malt when you're talking about heather. That kind of grassy, light floralness that you'll pick up sometimes in a Highland malt typically. Sometimes lowlands. But here, we're picking up a little bit of that in there. And that's just kind of a nice little neat nuance that you typically don't find in a $35 bottle. You know, they're typically pretty boring, to be honest. This one is far from boring and really, really solid. Well done. All right. So the next one we're going to take a look at is the Lot 40 Dark Oak. Again, we've talked about the number 2 char for the majority of its maturation, 100% rye, and then finished on the level 4 char. Very, very dark. Immediately on the nose. Whereas this one was on that kind of fresh rye, that sprightly rye. Not this one. This is in that kind of dark rye, toasted dark rye bread. some plums, figs, dates, berry compote. So if you took this one would be like blackberries and blueberries, and then you kind of cooked them in a pan with a little bit of sugar. That's in there. There's a little bit of orange zest in here, maybe just a little bit of orange zest in with those berries. And then you get that heavy, kind of big dark oak, brooding oak on the back end. That's why they named it dark oak. But let's taste it. Medium, just above medium on the viscosity. I really like that there's all those notes that I just mentioned with a little bit of like a natural vanilla bean, Madagascar vanilla bean in there as well. And then, oof, oh, that's crazy. That rye is really wild because it enters and it's kind of dark with the kind of, again, baked plums, figs, dates, that kind of darkness hits early. But then you get this kind of herbaceousness mid palate. So typically you would see the baking spices or the cinnamon popping on that mid palate. Here you're seeing the intensity of this herbalness kind of growing on that mid palate. Hmm. And initially I thought it was, no, it comes off just as black licorice. But what it is that anise in with clove, and they are very big, and they're rising up to the very top. And then right when they get to the top, you start noticing this peach apricot thing. And the peach apricot starts rolling onto the finish, and you start fading on that kind of licorice clove. And now you got this peach apricot, this little citrus oil, like orange oil thing that was happening early on, kind of joining that. It starts rolling onto the back end. A little bit of coffee bean, definitely some dark chocolate here. Old leather as well. And again, that rich resinous oak, which gets its name, dark oak. Oh yeah. That's a beautiful, beautiful little rye there. Regardless if it went into recharred barrels or not, that's very, very well crafted. You never once pick up really that 96 proof. To me, this one drinks about 90. Again, I could see this one, you could make a cocktail with it. I wouldn't want to, but I could see this one easily going on a rock, and it would be phenomenal. All right, a little double rinse before we get to that Bhakta 1928. Okay, again, 60% rye, 30% Calvados, 10% Armagnac. The Armagnacs range from 1928, which is probably just teaspoon, and then I think there was some 90s vintages. There may have been an early 2000 vintage in there as well. I'll try to post them up, but here we go. Though at a minimum, they'll be in the description. Good grief. This one is more like, this one was like toasted rye bread. This one's kind of like fresh rye bread a little bit on the nose. But you can't even hardly focus on it because there's so much of that brandy kind of, and even though it's only 40% of the blend, when you're talking old Armagnac, old Calvados, it's going to really almost feel 50-50 with that 60% rye. If it was a really old rye, it might be able to hold its own, but here we are seeing it. Feels very, very balanced here. Again, this is more in the rye bread, almost like a brie with some kind of fig jam on there, buttery fig, dates, sweet dates, the medjool dates. There's kind of a leathery tone to it, but then you start picking up that kind of soured fruit. That's the Armagnac or the Calvados in there. And then there's also a really big Rancio, which is just purely coming off, more than likely, some of the Armagnac, but that's only 10%. That 30% Calvados. If that's old Calvados, like 20 to 25 year, it's going to give you a lot of that kind of earthy mushroom Rancios. Sometimes they'll go into blue cheese, This one's not doing that. This one's more into like kind of damp cellar, musty oak barrel. Oh, it's beautiful. All right, here we go. It's ridiculous how good that is. All right, try to describe it. Kind of brown sugar, kind of molasses, kind of a little rummy in the overall essence of the thing. The way the rye and the brandy is blended, it almost makes you feel kind of rummy on it on the palate. Not super sugary rum, pure rum, where it's just pure distillate, aged up 15, 20 years, and then put it in 100 proof. Lots of flavor. Um, but you do get a little bit of that kind of rye bread initially. You get that orange oil, that little soft, it's very soft early on. And then you see this rancio kind of come in and it starts, and it almost feels like it doesn't like waft in, it feels like it just raises from the bottom. And you get that kind of earthy, little spearmint, touch of spearmint. That's from the Armagnac. That little touch of spearmint, earthiness, light mushroom. And then at the very top, you see that rye just kind of floating on the top. The rye's got that orange oil, that little bit of clove. Very, very light nuttiness in there as well. Very savory. You salivate on this whiskey. This one just, it makes you go back for another sip. Now, the only sad thing I can say about this bottle is I don't see a way to know which batch you're getting. You just have to be ready for that kind of, I don't know, it's almost like grandma's closet, dusty, dank cellar, lightly mushroom rancio. If you can handle that, if you taste this and you love that, then you need to get into some old brandies, old Armagnacs, because that's exactly what this is. But I hope you enjoyed this video review. Of course, if you did, please consider joining me over at patreon.com/LiquorHound, where you can help support this channel because I am self-purchasing these bottles. And so you know at least you're getting a straightforward, honest review, unbiased. I'm not beholden to anybody because I'm not sponsored by anybody. So if you can, help us join us over there. $5 a month, $10 a month is all I'm asking. You can keep this channel going. You're going to get these videos 2 weeks early. You're going to get bonus content because, again, at the beginning of this video, I gave a lot of my best of picks already, so they already know. They're already on the hunt 4 weeks before it'll ever hit YouTube. But join us over there if you can. Again, ad-free videos, a complete video review library that's never been on YouTube. And again, if you can't, I really greatly appreciate each and every one of you, regardless of platform. Everyone have a great day, and cheers.